Never confuse passivity for kindness. Tom Schwartz is proof that being spineless can be just as destructive as being cruel. Tom Schwartz once confessed, at a reunion no less, that he wondered if he might be asexual. A curious declaration, given his long resume of drunken makeouts, alleged hookups, and general inability to keep his lips, and occasionally more, to himself. Of course, this revelation was met with all the guidance and sensitivity one might expect from his confidants Jax Taylor and Tom Sandoval, which is to say, none at all. But here lies the contradiction. For a man allegedly disinterested in sex, Schwartz cheated with the frequency of a frat boy. This wasn't lust, it was validation. The sloppy makeouts, the desperate proving he could, the endless alcohol-fueled antics were less about desire and more about ego. He wasn't overwhelmed with passion. He was asserting control, reassuring himself that he had options beyond Katie. Cheating, for Schwartz, was less carnal than performative. The asexuality question is worth exploring, though. Asexuality exists on a spectrum, and yes, an asexual person can still engage in sex for reasons unrelated to attraction, validation, intimacy, boredom, or, in Schwartz's case, booze. And while he claimed most of his indiscretions amounted to just kissing, the show's footage, Jax's habitual tattling, and Schwartz's evasive denials suggest otherwise. Katie, like so many Vanderpump women before her, seemed forced into the role of public apologist, pretending to believe his version of events just to hold the relationship together. What their marriage revealed was less about sexual incompatibility and more about mutual misery. Schwartz's seduction attempts, junk food bribes, an ill-timed violinist, and his cartoonish Puis Bubba routine were so awkward they could repel even the most devoted spouse. Katie, meanwhile, withering under years of neglect, insults, and emotional abandonment, eventually stopped trying. Their relationship became a bleak cycle of her demanding intimacy, him withholding it, and both lashing out with insults, broken dick versus bitch, while producers gleefully zoomed in. Schwartz's fixation on unattainable women, whether drunken strangers or Lisa Vanderpump herself, only sharpened the cruelty. He heaped more flirtatious attention on his boss than his wife, joking about her virginity, tattooing her initials on his skin, and waxing poetic about shaving her legs in the tub. Katie received scraps in comparison, followed by condescending praise whenever she fell in line with his or Sandoval's opinions. "I love when you're reasonable, Bubba," he'd beam, like a trainer tossing a dog a treat. Years of that conditioning left Katie diminished, insecure, and still clinging to a marriage that clearly should have ended by season 3. Alcohol only amplified his worst qualities, the blackouts, the infidelity, and likely the performance issues. Jax himself openly mocked Schwartz's inability to perform, and while Jax is hardly a moral compass, he knew his friend well enough to weaponize the truth when it suited him. Whether Schwartz's lack of libido was alcohol-induced impotence, genuine disinterest, or simply Katie-specific apathy, the result was the same: a toxic, sexless marriage propped up for the cameras. In the end, Schwartz never wanted Katie. He wanted the structure she provided. She organized his life, smoothed over his messes, and gave his floundering man-child routine a semblance of stability. Once that scaffolding crumbled, he drifted into relationships with unstable or much younger women, clinging to dynamics where he could remain the irresponsible, charming Bubba without accountability. Their marriage was a performance of convenience, not a union of equals. He was manipulative, passive-aggressive, and deeply misogynistic. She was controlling, volatile, and endlessly frustrated. Together, they were combustible. The only mystery is why it took them nearly a decade to walk away. Here's what nobody at Bravo wants to admit: Scheana'S is less reality star and more reality parasite. Scheana'S has built an entire persona on inserting herself into other people's storylines, and now it seems the Bravosphere is finally catching on. When both Tamra Judge and Adriana Demura, two women from entirely different corners of the franchise, publicly cite her as the Bravo-lebrity they least want to encounter at BravoCon, the message is loud and clear. Scheana fatigue has gone mainstream. Her problem isn't ambition, it's desperation. Every year brings a new dream job, depending on which Bravo door she's trying to wedge herself into. First, it was hosting Watch What Happens Live in Andy Cohen's chair, then Dancing with the Stars, and now, naturally, Real Housewives of Orange County. The sheer whiplash of these shifting goals exposes less a woman with vision than one grasping at whatever rung might drag her back into relevance. The second-hand embarrassment is relentless. Imagining crop-top Scheana sharing the stage with Heather Fancy Pants Dubrow isn't a Bravo fever dream, it's performance art in delusion. Her attempts at witty commentary register less as humor and more as smug pot-stirring, which explains why she's managed to irritate cast members from Miami to the OC, and everyone in between. Even Adriana, who actually has a musical career of substance, dismissed Scheana'S meddling in her personal life as pure nuisance. What's striking is how universal the disdain has become. From reality veterans to newer Bravo names, there seems to be no city or spin-off immune from a Scheana cameo, or her uncanny ability to overstep. She hitches herself to whatever ensemble is trending: Mom Talk, Southern Hospitality, RHOC, parading alliances that feel more transactional than genuine. It's hustle, yes, but the kind that smells of panic rather than power. The saddest irony is that even the villain edit gravy train seems to be passing her by. Shows like Traitors, Special Forces, and House of Villains are scooping up Bravo stars left and right. But not her. Watching Tom Sandoval get booked while she lingers in the Bravo lobby must sting. At one point, Scheana'S grind was almost admirable. She worked, she networked, she stayed visible. But now it veers into caricature, a woman so busy trying to be everywhere that she's effectively nowhere. When even your book tour leaves fans empty-handed, the brand collapse is complete. If she truly wants to secure a future in this universe, perhaps the next dream job should be learning how to exit gracefully. Because at this point, the only thing Scheana is hosting is her own decline. Everyone blames Brock for Scheana Shea's downfall, but the truth is, Scheana was always her own worst enemy. The question is often asked, would Scheana Shea's reality television career have survived had she never married Brock? The answer is both simple and brutal. Brock may have accelerated the implosion, but the truth is, Scheana was always destined to self-destruct. Scheana has spent her career desperately clawing for the spotlight, determined to be the show's it girl. Brandy, Nene, Lisa, Stassi, Ariana, Bethany, all rolled into one. The problem? Trying to be everyone else leaves little room to be yourself. Instead of building a brand, she built a revolving door of half-baked identities, switching personas based on audience feedback. Authenticity, that elusive quality, separating reality stars from reality filler, has never been her strong suit. Her personal life is equally revealing. Scheana'S romantic track record reads less like a search for love and more like a resume of opportunists, culminating in Brock, who brought the trifecta of red flags: financial dependence, a conveniently timed green card, and a history of abandonment. One doesn't accidentally marry a man who looks like a walking cautionary tale. One chooses him out of desperation. Scheana'S low self-esteem and obsessive need for male validation ensured she would land with someone, anyone, who gave her the illusion of commitment. Brock simply happened to be the unlucky winner. Yet, to blame him entirely is to miss the larger picture. Scheana'S relationships with men, friends, and even her audience are transactional at best. She demands loyalty but rarely offers it, turning betrayals into a professional pastime. Once she alienated Ariana, her last tether to audience goodwill, the jig was up. Without genuine friendships anchoring her storylines, producers were left with a woman staging drama no one believed, begging for relevance that never arrived. And then there is the personality problem. Scheana is a self-described people-pleaser, yet she pleases no one. She is controlling, self-absorbed, and incapable of centering anyone's narrative but her own. So much so that Ariana's devastating betrayal was reframed as Scheana'S emotional hardship. The audience saw through it, and unlike other unlikable but iconic cast members, Lala comes to mind, Scheana lacks the charisma to balance her flaws. What's left is desperation, and desperation rarely sells. Her memoir only cemented the perception, a woman who admits to craving validation while remaining oblivious to the wreckage she leaves behind. Instead of accountability, readers got excuses. Instead of insight, self-pity. The result? Burned bridges with friends, fans, and professional allies alike. Yes, Brock is a liability. His documented history of abuse, deadbeat tendencies, and emotional manipulation ensures that. But he is merely a symptom of Scheana's greater issue, Scheana herself. If it hadn't been him, it would have been another opportunist. She has been spiraling since Season 8, long before Brock entered the picture, and her refusal to do the difficult work of self-reflection sealed her fate. In the end, Scheana Shay will not be remembered as a reality TV star, but as a reality TV cautionary tale. The woman who wanted so badly to be everything to everyone became nothing to anyone. Her legacy is not a career cut short by Brock, but a career strangled by her own hands. This is exactly how to ruin every friendship, every opportunity, and your Bravo paycheck in one spectacular spiral. Scheana Shay has managed, yet again, to transform herself into the center of a storm no one asked for. Once practically glued to Lala Kent's side, with Brock slipping into the role of bonus parent to Lala's daughter. Their bond has now soured into public animosity. The reasons, as always with Scheana, are both petty and spectacularly self-inflicted. Her current roster of sparring partners reads like a Bravo roll call. Lala, Katie, to some extent, Tamra Judge, Adriana Demora, and even Captain Jason from Below Deck. The unifying theme? Confusion. None of them seem to understand why Scheana has inserted herself into their narratives. But Scheana has never needed a logical reason to stir the pot, only a perceived slight. The Adriana feud is perhaps the most juvenile. After Adriana went out a few times with Captain Jason, she casually recounted the story in front of Scheana. Cue Scheana'S Regina George moment. She allegedly texted Jason mid-bus ride, warning him that Adriana was obsessed. Jason, predictably, pulled back from Adriana. Petty sabotage at its finest, and precisely the kind of middle school behavior Scheana has perfected. Then there's her issue with Lala. Much of it boils down to professional envy. Lala secured a full-time role on The Valley, a role Scheana reportedly wanted, and suddenly the friendship cracked. It's a familiar pattern. Scheana was similarly bitter when Ariana nabbed Dancing with the Stars. Loyalty, in her world, is transactional. If she claps for someone else, she expects a standing ovation in return. Case in point, her outrage over book promotion. Lala didn't plug Scheana'S memoir with sufficient enthusiasm, and Scheana took it personally. Never mind that she has a track record of naming and shaming friends who fail to post about her projects as loudly or as often as she demands. Never mind that she herself has been stingy in promoting others' work. The hypocrisy is as consistent as it is exhausting. Scheana'S book has, in fact, been her undoing. Instead of cementing her credibility, it alienated friends and exposed her jealous streak. She used it to reveal supposed secrets, Ariana's, Lala's, even Lisa Vanderpump's, only to come off as bitter. Ariana's meteoric success, in particular, seems to haunt her. While Ariana thrives on talent, Scheana appears destined to remain Bravo's perennial understudy. Her so-called friendships operate like a shaky investment portfolio. She scatters crumbs of loyalty to too many people, then demands full loaves in return. When the return doesn't materialize, she sets the whole thing on fire. Ariana, once her most reliable ally, has reportedly had enough. Even Lala, whose own loyalty has always been flexible at best, seems to have recognized that standing too close to Scheana can scorch. The irony, of course, is that Scheana still clings to the fantasy of being indispensable. Listed or not, invited or not, she would almost certainly show up to BravoCon because in her mind, the circus cannot function without her. Yet the producers appear to disagree. Rumors swirl that she has been iced out of the valley, not because of fan backlash, but because she broke the fourth wall one too many times, admitting that scenes were staged, revealing producer manipulation, and even accusing Lisa Vanderpump of exploiting her pain for profit. Ultimately, Scheana is furious because the spotlight is not hers. When others succeed, she sulks. When others fail to lift her up, she lashes out. When others protect their own interests, she calls it betrayal. And now, with her bridges burning faster than she can build new ones, she finds herself in a familiar position. Surrounded by enemies, abandoned by friends, and left wondering why loyalty never seems to pay off. The answer is simple. Scheana's only true loyalty has always been to Scheana. Everyone else is expendable. Everyone loves to paint Ariana as the victim, but what if I told you Scheana was actually the one who got it right? If Vanderpump Rules thrives on dysfunction, then Scheana Shay is the show's most reliable power source. She is, simultaneously, the comic relief, the misguided truth-teller, and the walking embodiment of second-hand embarrassment. Cringe is her native language, yet without her, the show would lose a crucial layer of absurdity. Take the infamous narcissist text to Ariana's mother. By Scheana logic, responding to a casual holiday greeting with a psychological diagnosis of her best friend's boyfriend is not only acceptable, but responsible. The defense? Ariana's mother asked how her daughter was doing, and Scheana, ever the self-appointed savior, delivered her unfiltered assessment of Tom. Was it messy? Absolutely. Was it classic Scheana? Without question. And, inconveniently for her detractors, she happened to be right. This is the maddening paradox of Scheana Shay. On the rare occasions when she is correct, viewers bend over backwards to deny her credibility. Because if Scheana is right, then Ariana, the supposed voice of reason, was complicit in propping up Tom Sandoval's nonsense for years. The revisionist history is almost comical. Scheana was bullied into silence, branded a meddler, and vilified for being messy. Yet here, she was the only one willing to puncture Ariana's carefully curated delusion. Of course, Scheana is not some unsung heroine. Her history of flip-flopping loyalties, desperate attempts to fit in, and Lisa Vanderpump worship have made her as untrustworthy as she is entertaining. Her business relationship with Lisa, dating back to RBH days, makes it clear her first loyalty has always been to production value, not friendship. If the best storyline required betraying a friend, Scheana would deliver the scene, smiling through the tears, mascara perfectly smeared. Still, her insecurities, while glaring, make her oddly sympathetic. For years, she was the punching bag of the Stassi-Katie-Kristen Mean Girl alliance, clawing for validation in a friend group that openly despised her. Even now, she's perpetually the outsider, too earnest for the cool kids, too calculating for the audience to fully trust. She is both pitiable and infuriating, an endless contradiction. But then there are moments that remind us exactly why she will never transcend pick-me status. The unforgettable line about preferring to be gangbanged rather than ride in the other car wasn't just tone-deaf, it was nauseating. Her occasional flashes of honesty and vulnerability collapse under the weight of these desperate grabs for male approval. Scheana cannot be a consistent ally to women because her internalized misogyny won't allow it. And yet, she endures. Scheana Shay is not a villain, not a saint, and certainly not a reliable friend. She is insecure, short-sighted, and terminally pick-me, but she is also resilient, oddly well-intentioned, and forever willing to humiliate herself for the sake of airtime. In other words, she is reality television gold. Lisa Vanderpump didn't protect James Kennedy's sobriety. She protected her ratings. Lisa Vanderpump's handling of James Kennedy's drinking problem has always been inconsistent, but by season 10, it reached the level of outright whiplash. This is the same woman who once declared James an alcoholic and insisted he should never touch another drop in his life. Yet suddenly, she was unbothered when he began sipping cocktails again, as though his history of drunken cruelty had evaporated with a martini garnish. What changed? Did she quietly abandon her crusade? Or did ratings outweigh her convictions? It's worth remembering that sobriety was never James's real problem. It was simply the accelerant on his already toxic personality. Alcohol made his viciousness harder to ignore, but even sober, he remained cruel, manipulative, and abusive. To suggest he should ever drink again is absurd. Lisa knew this, yet softened her stance, apparently relieved that his behavior was at least somewhat less grotesque without the booze. A low bar, but one she seemed content to settle for. The motivations behind her reversal are complex. On one hand, Lisa has always been a producer first and a mentor second. James, for better or worse, delivers television, and Vanderpump Rules was already hemorrhaging cast members. Keeping him in the mix, chaotic, British, and perpetually combustible, was likely a strategic decision. It wouldn't be the first time Lisa's maternal concern suspiciously aligned with her business interests. On the other hand, her history complicates the narrative. Lisa lost her brother to suicide during the show's run, a trauma she openly connected to her relationship with James. Both were DJs, both had issues with alcohol, and both were young men spinning their lives out of control. Lisa has admitted she saw James as an echo of her brother, someone she could save when she couldn't save her own family. Her guilt and survivor's grief fueled a misguided sense of obligation, reinforced by James's dysfunctional parents, who repeatedly looked to her to clean up their son's mess. Her relationship with his mother was fraught, yet Lisa still shouldered responsibility she should never have accepted. Thus emerges the paradox. Lisa, the empathetic rescuer, versus Lisa, the ratings shark. At times, she acts out of loyalty, guilt, or genuine compassion. At others, she coldly calculates what storyline will sell. James benefits from both sides of that coin, shielded by her soft heart and her hard-nosed business brain. But here lies the uncomfortable truth. James Kennedy is not merely a troubled young man with a drinking problem. He is an abuser, particularly of women, and that fact should not be blurred under the haze of good TV. Sobriety doesn't erase his cruelty. It only makes it easier for him to disguise. By welcoming him back into the fold, Lisa not only minimized his behavior, but also allowed it to be reframed as a subplot rather than a disqualifier. Perhaps Lisa saw in James the brother she lost, or perhaps she simply saw a ratings lifeline. Either way, she had it right the first time. James is someone who should never drink again. The tragedy is that she knew it, said it, and then conveniently forgot it when business demanded otherwise. Was Rachel the victim of cruel castmates, or the architect of her own downfall? Let's be honest, it was both. Rachel Season 7, a study in posture, performance, and the peculiar alchemy reality TV performs on fragile ambitions. She arrived soft-eyed and deferential when attached to James. Polished, practiced, the small-town pageant poise still intact. The minute that tether snapped, the polish flaked off, and what remained was raw entitlement, poor timing, and a baffling inability to read the room. The most telling moment wasn't a fight, so much as the casual cruelty directed at Katie's mother during a supposedly celebratory gathering, the kind of conversational elbow that signals someone who no longer cares how they look to others because the costume has been shed. That costume matters. For years, her identity seemed stitched to pageant rules, always smiling, always measured. When that structure dissolved, the competitive energy didn't evaporate. It migrated. Ambition turned inward and outward at once. A hunger for validation from men, a craving for screen time, and the kind of social climbing that mistakes visibility for influence. She wanted to be liked, to matter, and to be central, so she willfully misread every social cue that suggested she wasn't wanted. Production smoothed the seams of that performance. Newcomers are often soft-launched into serialized frictions, a staged lunch with a new friend, then sudden, relentless airtime. The assembly line push for narrative makes manipulation and awkward attempts at belonging look worse. And sometimes it shapes the behavior itself. Her insistence on befriending women who made it clear they didn't want her was less a mystery than a business decision. Without James, she risked being invisible. That calculus explains a lot of the persistent, transparent efforts to insert herself into group dynamics that fundamentally rejected her. She was not merely naive, she was strategic in her dependence. Her loyalty to James, even as he behaved badly, reads less like romance and more like a calculated career move, an on-camera partnership that afforded access. When that partnership collapsed, the identity collapse followed. A person freed from coercion but unmoored, lashing out in ways that landed as cruel, manipulative, and sometimes bafflingly stupid. The insults she received, especially from Lala, landed because they cut through the pretense. The snark stuck because much of what she offered on camera invited it. Abuse and accountability are messier. Reports of physical and animal mistreatment around James complicate any tidy moral ledger. One can recognize his alleged violence and also criticize her choices. Victim and perpetrator roles can, regrettably, overlap. Her actions toward close friends, betrayals, affairs, public humiliations, were abusive in their own right and worthy of condemnation. It's a reminder that television compresses human complexity into digestible moral narratives, but complexity does not absolve cruelty. There's also the spectacle of performance anxiety, equating a beauty queen title with professional competence, declaring pageant identity as career justification, and conflating fame with worth. The claim to a crown, real or inflated, became a shorthand for insecurity. Pageants teach posture and presentation. They do not create professional credentials. That conflation was repeatedly, painfully evident. Finally, the cast and the camera share culpability. The women who ostracized her were not paragons of virtue. Many were themselves culpable in betrayals and manipulations. Yet mistreatment does not erase the harm she inflicted. Reality TV incentivizes extremes: loyalty, infamy, or obsolescence. She chose visibility and paid the predictable price. In short, this was never a tale of a naif crushed by the machine. It was the predictable spiral of someone who weaponized pageant polish into social leverage, clung to a problematic partnership for access, and then, once free, mistook unfiltered freedom for authenticity. The result was equal parts performative desperation, genuine harm, and the kind of on-screen train wreck viewers both condemn and can't look away from. They flew Britney 15 hours to Morocco for this, and a drill sergeant called it a waste of airfare. Was he wrong? Britney's stint on Special Forces, World's Toughest Test, was less toughest test and more expensive vacation with a dramatic exit. The highlight of her pre-show confidence was the claim that chasing around a 4-year-old would somehow prepare her for military-style drills. A charming sentiment, if not for the small detail that the nanny does most of the chasing. If the competition had been hauling 800 pounds of tequila, beer cheese, and Amazon party decorations uphill, she might have been the frontrunner. Unfortunately, it required stamina, grit, and actual training. 3 things she proudly skipped in favor of cocktails. Predictably, Britney quit almost immediately, reportedly before the group even reached the tents. One drill sergeant, unable to contain himself, quipped in a confessional that the entire ordeal was a waste of airfare. Considering production flew her 15 hours to Morocco for what amounted to 2 challenges and a dramatic collapse, it's difficult to argue with him. The irony is that she entered determined to prove everyone wrong. Instead, she confirmed every doubt. No training regimen, no change in lifestyle, no preparation beyond blind optimism. The result was a brief, humiliating exit that likely earned her the same paycheck as competitors who actually endured the experience, a particularly galling detail. Then there's the Jax factor. Britney remains in constant contact with her ex, which she frames as co-parenting but often looks more like unfinished business. When he confessed to cheating with Faith, her immediate response was to double down on intimacy with him. When he pretended to attend rehab, she never blocked his messages. This isn't co-parenting, it's clinging. Some suspect she's even laying the groundwork for a reconciliation storyline on reality TV. After all, attention from Jax, positive or negative, seems to be a currency she can't quit. As for Jax himself, his taunts from the sidelines ring hollow. He may sport muscles, but his track record on competitive reality TV is hardly impressive. First booted on House of Villains, nearly drowning at Big Bear, and generally relying on showmanship over stamina. He's the last person who should be heckling someone else's endurance. Ultimately, Brittany's performance was delusional from start to finish. She promised a triumph and delivered a flop. If she hoped to inspire her son with an example of resilience, the lesson was unfortunately clear. Don't confuse wishful thinking with preparation, and don't mistake party stamina for survival skills. You didn't miss Ariana and Kristen's friendship arc. Bravo made sure you never saw it. The great tragedy of Vanderpump Rules isn't merely that it descended into a carousel of drunken male debauchery, but that it actively buried the more compelling storylines, often those involving women finding common ground, instead of clawing each other apart. Case in point, the evolution of Ariana and Kristen's friendship. Producers have admitted that post-Scandival, one of the show's biggest missed opportunities was failing to highlight the unlikely but fascinating bond between these two women. Instead of exploring how sworn enemies slowly became allies, the cameras were too busy fetishizing James, Jax, Sandoval, and Schwartz staggering around drunk and mistreating women. Bravo apparently thought toxic masculinity on parade was a more riveting plotline than female growth. When Ariana and Kristen's rapport finally surfaced in Season 7, it appeared out of nowhere, as though conjured by magic. There was no build-up, no confessionals, no explanation, just a sudden ceasefire. One day they were hurling insults, the next they were friends. Lisa Vanderpump's editorial scissors can likely be thanked for that. Heaven forbid the spotlight shift from the men she so dutifully shields. Still, the remnants of that shift peeked through. There's the unforgettable moment of Kristen awkwardly perched beside Sandoval, quipping that it felt like sitting with someone's dad before a date, right after Sandoval's cringe-inducing monologue about home improvements he probably didn't even complete. It was uncomfortable, messy, and revealing, exactly the kind of texture the show should have leaned into. The signs of Kristen and Ariana's detente were always there, buried between tequila-soaked meltdowns and half-baked boys' night antics. Whether it was the Vegas kiss or the Mexico joke about Kristen stealing Ariana, the foundation existed. What was missing was the storytelling. Instead, the narrative was sacrificed on the altar of Bravo's favorite pastime, glorifying bad men behaving badly. Here's what Vanderpump Rules doesn't want you to remember about Season 6. A man's predatory behavior was laughed off, twisted, and never held accountable. Season 6, Episode 14, offers a case study in how Vanderpump Rules can take a deeply uncomfortable situation and promptly fumble it into oblivion. The Jeremy storyline, already unpleasant, was made worse by the way it was spun, minimized, and ultimately ignored when accountability could have been demanded. The flashback says it all: a man cornering a woman into a hug without consent. It's not charming, it's not harmless, it's terrifying, particularly when the man in question isn't a close friend, but an acquaintance you feel socially obligated not to upset. That kind of pressure, subtle as it may seem, is exactly why the moment lands as predatory rather than playful. Enter Billy Lee, who decided to reframe Stassi and Kristen's entirely reasonable observation that Jeremy had a habit of hitting on everybody into some mean-spirited campaign against her. The narrative was twisted, whether out of genuine misunderstanding or calculated self-insertion. Given Billy Lee's track record of opportunistic mess-making, it's hard to grant the benefit of the doubt. But the most disappointing reaction came from Ariana. Yes, Jeremy is her brother, and instinctively defending him is human nature. Still, doing so by diminishing the lived experiences of other women was indefensible. Instead of acknowledging their discomfort, she dismissed it, prioritizing family loyalty over female solidarity. A simple line like, "I'm sorry you had that experience with my brother, but he's my brother, and I'll always defend him," would have been honest without erasing anyone else's perspective. Instead, the defense turned grossly dismissive. The fact that none of this was properly addressed at the reunion is the final insult. The entire situation was mishandled start to finish. a storyline that exposed more about the cast's loyalties and blind spots than it did about Jeremy himself. Everyone blames Jax Taylor for the cheating, but Brittany's choice to stay might be the bigger scandal. Brittany Cartwright's relationship with Jax Taylor always raised the eternal question: was she naive, desperate, or simply strategic? When Jax's cheating came to light, the logical response would have been to pack up and leave. Yet Brittany stayed, on camera no less, cementing the suspicion that she valued a storyline more than self-respect. Her integration into the group virtually guaranteed her a spot on the cast, even without Jax. She was far too woven into the Vanderpump tapestry to be cast aside simply because she ditched a philandering bartender, which makes her choice all the more baffling. If the cameras would have protected her, why cling to the man who publicly humiliated her? To preserve a narrative arc? To prove undying loyalty to Bravo's most unrepentant cheater? Or perhaps, tragically, because she really did love him? The network's history only reinforces the argument. Producers kept Rachel Levice after her breakup with James Kennedy, despite all expectations that she'd be disposable. That gamble eventually yielded the show's biggest scandal to date. Clearly, Bravo has no qualms about mining value from a single cast member, with or without their romantic attachments. Brittany's place was never as precarious as she might have believed. Then again, her family didn't help. Her father wanted her to leave Jax, but her mother seemed more enamored with the spotlight than concerned about her daughter's dignity. With maternal encouragement to stay the course, Brittany's devotion to Jax morphed into a joint audition for reality TV longevity. Whether it was love, fear, or sheer ambition, Brittany's decision to stay blurred the line between victim and opportunist. In the end, she wasn't just Jax's partner, she was his co-star, and perhaps that was always the real point.